Hello, and welcome to our very first episode of our 2025 live stream series, Wild in the Wetland, where we are going to learn all about the wetland in the wintertime and all the unique things there are to discover here at the Environmental Learning Center. My name is Rachel, and I am a watershed health educator here at the Environmental Learning Center, also known as the ELC. And I ended up in this position because I really care about our environment and I enjoy sharing my knowledge and my experiences with the community. So I'm very glad that I get to be here with you today. So the ELC is a 5-acre site where we have beautiful native plants and animals and a gorgeous waterway that flows through our wetland. So like I said, today is our first episode of our live stream called Wild in the Wetland. And this first episode is called Where Are You in the Watershed, where we will get to learn all about what a watershed is and which ones we live in, and the fact that we all live in a watershed. No matter where we are, we're always in a watershed. So I'm very excited to go through this episode with you. And the first thing that I want to share with you all is that you may have a activity sheet in front of you that you can see right now, and it's got the title of the episode at the top. And the first thing is a watershed study. It says that several watersheds are present in the graphic below. Color where the water would collect in each watershed, and there's a helpful hint that the black lines mark the high points of the landscape. So this activity may seem a little abstract right now, but that's okay because we are going to do this together during this episode. So no worries if you don't start it right away. But when we do, there's 2 questions below, and you'll put in how many watersheds are represented in the graphic above. And you'll also answer, what are some sources of pollution in your watershed? So we'll go through that activity together. And at the bottom, we have our community connections, which is something we'll have in each activity sheet and each episode, because we want you to be able to take what you learned today and take it back out into your community. So the question today is, what can you do to help improve water quality in your watershed? So feel free to work on this sheet during the episode or just after. So let's get started. So a watershed, the first part of that word is water. So let's think about all the ways that we as humans, how we use water every day. The first thing that comes to my mind is drinking water. I drink water every day to stay hydrated, and I'm sure you do too. So water helps to keep us alive. And if you look from all the way from the ground, from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head, I am actually made up of 60% water. That's over half. And so are you. And if we look at just our brain alone, it is made up of 75% water. That's a lot. So water is really important to humans, as well as important to all of the animals and plants in the landscape around me here at the wetland. So going forward, now that we are thinking about water and why it's so important, a watershed is an area of land where water flows down into a single body of water, like a river or a lake or even the ocean. And where I'm standing right now here at the ELC, we are on Clackamas Community College's campus in Oregon City. And you will see in just a second a map of the Newell Creek watershed. And Newell Creek is the creek that runs through here at the ELC. And on this map in about the bottom right area, it points to our location here at the ELC. And there's a yellow dotted line that shows the boundary of the Newell Creek watershed. And that means that within that boundary, whenever it rains or snows or any water flows in that area, all that water is going to find its way down to Newell Creek one way or the other. And that's what a watershed is. It's when the water flows over the landscape down into one particular body of water. And a landscape is a large area of land that has multiple different habitats. So that could be the Newell Creek watershed. And over that landscape, there's forests and wetlands and other types of habitats. So that's what a landscape is. Now, to give you an even better idea of a watershed and to talk a little bit more about some of the human impacts on our watersheds, we're going to go through that watershed activity. So I'm going to show you the first part here, and that is to take a piece of paper and we're going to crumple it up and make some good ridges. These ridges are going to show us the tops, the peaks of the landscape. And I'm going to put it in this tray here. Then, to help you see the peaks of the landscape, I'm going to color in with this marker. And it really helps to make it more obvious where the peaks are. These peaks play an important role in watersheds because they help us to differentiate all the different watersheds. All right, that looks like most all of them. So now that we've done that, I am going to give it a spray, and that's going to signify rain happening over the landscape. So let's see what happens when it rains. So as it's raining, the colors from that marker are flowing down into the different watersheds. And it may be a little hard to see because it's so light, but the water is pooling in these different watersheds here and here, some in here and over here. So it looks like we have maybe one right here, two here, and the third one over here. So it looks like we have 3 different watersheds occurring in our landscape. So within these landscapes, humans live in them. This could signify our neighborhoods or Oregon. And within the landscape, people build things like roads or schools or homes or businesses. And with all of that building and living, there are some impacts that can happen. And sometimes people can give off pollutants or do pollution. And so what pollution is when chemicals or materials are released into the environment and it harms an organism or harms multiple organisms. So go ahead and think about maybe what some sources of pollution could be in your watershed. The one that comes to my mind first is maybe oil leaking from a car. So on a roadway, that could be a source of pollution. Now, let's go ahead and represent that in our new watershed here that I've created, or rather our new landscape. So let's say that over here, there is a road and there's some oil that leaks through. So this road is a source of pollution. What other sorts of pollution could there be? If you have them, you can put them in the chat, but if not, that's okay. One that came to my mind was maybe like a factory that releases lots of smoke or fumes. That could be a pollutant. So we'll put that over here in the landscape. Now, let's say that there is another factory over here, and maybe another pollutant could be from a farm. So sometimes too many chemicals or fertilizers on a farm, they could end up in the water. So we'll put a couple of those points here. Now let's say that this this watershed back here, this area in the landscape has been set aside as a park or a natural area to enjoy where we can't build roads or homes or anything. So let's see what happens when it rains. And we'll see what happens in the protected area versus the area where we've developed some buildings and farms and such. All right, so we're seeing some different things here. It looks like in our factory area, the water's kind of going under the paper, so it's hard to see, but the water has kind of turned a darker color. And over here in our area with the road and the farms, the water has also turned a darker color because of those pollutants. But in our protected area, it looks like the water is still really clear. And so you can see that in the cleared water here. But like I said, on this side, some of the water has become darker. So that tells us that pollutants, even if they are on one side of the watershed, it can impact the entire watershed. So that's why we have to be very cautious and knowledgeable about how we impact our watershed. So hopefully that gives you a better idea about what a watershed looks like and how humans can have both good and maybe not so good impacts on our landscape and our watersheds. So speaking of humans, let's take a look around, and you may see some humans here at the ELC. People love to take walks, but you're going to see lots of different animals and insects and plants here at the ELC. So I'm going to show you some creatures now, and we're going to talk about how water impacts them and how they use water every day. So the first one is a mallard. And a mallard is another word for a duck, and you may have heard them behind me. But mallards use water all the time because they spend most of their time swimming around in the water and looking for food. And they can actually escape predators by going in the water. So it's a really important place for them. The water also helps plants to grow strong and abundant along the water's edge. So those plants in that photo are actually going to be homes for some of those ducks as they lay their eggs. So water is serving both the plants and the animals in this situation. Our next animal that you may find at the ELC, it looks like a beaver, but it's not. It's actually a nutria. And a nutria is a rodent. It's a semi-aquatic rodent. It spends part of its time in the water and part of its time on the land. And so its main food source is just plants. So similar to the ducks, it's really important for that water to be clean and healthy there because it helps those plants to grow healthy and is a main food source for the nutria. The next animal you'll find at the ELC is a great blue heron, and that is a slightly bigger bird than a duck and has some cool long legs, and they use water to hunt for fish and find food. So water is very important to them. One of my favorites is a dragonfly, and you will see them here at the ELC zipping around and flying over the water. Maybe not in the winter time, but in more of the summertime you might. But the dragonfly really needs water because they spend the entire first part of their lives in the water as eggs, and then they hatch into nymphs, which is what we call the younger version of a dragonfly. And eventually they grow up into these adult dragonflies that fly around the wetland. And then the cycle continues because those adults will lay their eggs in the water. So without water, dragonflies would not be able to survive in our wetland if there was no clean water. Now, this next creature is kind of hard to see in this photo. So I'll give you a moment to take a look and see if you can find our creature here. So if you've got good eyes, you maybe could see a frog is camouflaged in the plants and the water and the mud there. And I'll give you a closer picture here. That is actually a northern red-legged frog. And they used to be more abundant here in the area, but their populations have declined over time. But last year, we were actually able to see a red-legged frog, and we were able to see an egg mass in the water. So we are very hopeful that these northern red-legged frogs will continue to thrive and grow here at the ELC, and we'll be able to see more of them here. So I think that is all the time we have for today. And if you have any questions, go ahead and send them into the chat, and I would be happy to answer them. No questions so far. That's okay. Sometimes we don't have questions right away, and that's all right. You got a lot of information today. You may have heard one of the mallards quacking behind me. They're very active this time of year. All right, well, if there's no questions, then I think that is the end of our time. And I really hope that you enjoyed your time in our first episode today. Please join me next time because I will be getting into the wetland and we'll be learning about macroinvertebrates. So I hope you can join me. And until next time, stay curious, get outside to explore, and I'll see you around the wetland.